there.
No, I probably wasn't. All right, perfect.
Right, all right, all right, all right. Yeah, it's a good day today. I'm feeling it.
It is a good day today. I agree with you. What does, well, let me, I actually haven't really looked at the astrology for like us getting started today. But there's a Sun Saturn square that's building in a Moon Saturn opposition. So I always find that kind of interesting. Both luminaries are in hard aspect with Saturn at the moment.
Yes, and let me tell you, my Capricorn South Node feels it and is like,
Can
yes,
it?
we're gonna produce today. Like I got this morning being like, let me tell you what, I have got 16 videos left to record to throw up.
Yeah.
I'm pumped. I
Yeah.
even feel like my lip gloss feels good about what we're
Listen,
gonna
if it's popping, if the lip gloss is popping, then the lip gloss is cool. So that's actually pretty great. I mean, I've been consulting through this, so it's kind of funny because I haven't really been planning like my workload around it because I don't have a whole lot of daylight lately. So it's like I fit in what I can, where I can, get in where you fit in, kind of thing.
Yes.
And it, yeah, exactly. It is actually nice to live life that way and to not have too much on your plate where you can't be a little bit more, organic with what comes in and comes out. But yeah, this opposition with both luminaries, you know what it has been. In some way, it's been about a need for there to be good attention. This is what I've been finding over the last, just the last 3 consults that I had this morning, where there was one of them, it was something to do with the publicists. Another one, it was having to do with the relationship and feeling like they weren't getting the truth. And then the other one, I kind of forget now. But the theme seemed very much connected with this idea of illumination, getting the truth about things, and transparency, and getting attention and light and recognition. All of that was just struggling as a principle to kind of come together. So I'm excited for this to move away.
Well, but yeah. I love that that's what you're seeing over there, because that in my personal life and in my professional life and in consultations, that is exactly what I'm seeing as well, which I think makes our topic today even more poignant, because I do think that this particular lunar eclipse that we're going to be having in Taurus energy, Taurus is like, let's just get it out here because we need to move on. Like being held back and constipated is not practical. So there is a level, I think, of some practical revelation of what's kind of been building, and Scorpio season has been helping to coax out,
Yeah.
So,
my Pisces and my Cancer babies are just like, they can't help themselves. They hear a nice voice. That's not mine. They're like, oh my gosh, she sounds friendly. Where is she? And so they're all
yes, that's okay. I love it. I was like, I didn't even know there was a cat in the window, so we're going to do that.
No cat, just a funny looking dog.
Oh, it's
yeah. It's a miniature pinscher. No, he looks like a tiny little Doberman. He thinks he's, a big deal, but he is about the size of a cat.
Oh my God, that's great. So today, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's eat and greet, where hopefully in this next hour you hear something is worth the time that you took to show up. And I think today you certainly will. I mean, we've already got some laughter and some joy just radiating energetically. So hopefully that's touching you. You're feeling that over there. And we're going to talk about the lunar eclipse that's coming up here in November in the energy of Taurus. And we are also going to explore how that impacts 2022. But then also we're going to talk about the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction that is coming up in 2022. And we may trace that back so you can see where we came from in 2009, which is a whole bag of chips. Like we were really on the way to working from home. It's just beautiful. So we'll get to explore all of that. And after stalking him, honestly to God, stalking him on the internet, I got to get connected with Wade Caves, and I'm so genuinely happy to have you here. So welcome.
Me too. Hi. Thanks for having me.
This is everybody. This is the Astrology Soulmate.
Hey, everybody.
This is Wade. Yeah. So we get together. We have cups. Like I'm going to send Wade a cup, guys. He's going to get a cup. Right?
Super excited about the mug. It says, hello, astrology friend. Is that what it is?
It says, hello, astrology soulmates, with my little goddess body on there like this.
Period. Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait. It can go right in the coffee shelf. It'll be the first one I grab in the morning.
That's perfect. Great. And Elaine, who's my model, she too is snatched. So it's all good.
Do we want to explain? Would you like to stand for the cameras? Would you like to quickly
yes.
stand, Stormie, to, yes, look at it. This is where the snatch came from. That's nothing to do with me.
Oh, all right. All right. So wait, so I ask everybody when they come, how'd you get into astrology and what are you doing in astrology today?
Yeah. The answer is very simple for me. It was, I got into astrology to fit in. I think that a lot of people would be surprised to hear that I grew up in a military family and a divorced family. So we moved a lot. By the time I was in 10th grade, I'd been in 13 different schools, and I was really, you know, I've been bouncing around different friend groups for a long time. And I moved to a new town, and I really couldn't find a way to connect with anybody, but I met a group of girls who were, you know, kind of willing to take me under their wing, and, you know, so I didn't have to be the lone kid sitting alone at lunch every day. And astrology was something that they were, at least a few of them were kind of into. Now, I did not even know what astrology was. However, where I lived the year before, we were very much into Sailor Moon. And if you know anything about Sailor Moon, exactly, you basically have 20% of your astrology done. So, you know, it's like, if you understand Sailor Moon, that's 20% of the work. So there was something kind of, you know, very useful in giving a little bit of a leg up. I mean, theoretically, I could have chosen to take an interest in numerology or folk music or writing vampire novels, or I don't know, any of that. And that same friend group would have accepted me, but astrology just kind of was the one that I was like, well, you know, I feel some connection to it. And I almost left it. I mean, I nursed like an on and off interest through, you know, middle school and high school. I wrote about it in high school for my like final essay in my advanced placement English thing that was like supposed to be college. They always, and I don't know about your generation, because we're probably about just a few years separated in terms of like the year that we graduate from high school, but they tried to shove like all these college courses down our, they're like, oh, take this, you'll get extra credit. Did you have that where you went to school? Oh my gosh. And did any of it turn into actually college credit? Not a single bit of it did for me.
Mine did, but I took, like, I was a language person, so they were like, we just want to know if you could speak it.
See, and that feels to me very practical. They were getting us to sign up for all these things that we had to pay money for and do this, that, the other. I don't know. But what I did get to do is write a quick little thing about astrology. And my teacher actually went to my church, and so it was an opportunity also for me to kind of intellectually spar on the idea, and it was good. I wrote about Bill Clinton and his astrology, and I got all it said across the top, I got an A+, and then it just said, all I can say is you left me curious. That's what the teacher wrote, and I felt like, well, I will take that. I felt very good with that, and then, you know, I think in college it was time for me to give it up, but I ended up studying with the Mayo, and then finding, you know, kind of my path into what I do today. So I studied with the Mayo School of Astrology in 2011 and 2012. I think it was 2011. It might have just been 2012 or 2012. And I was studying modern psychological astrology, which I still very much love. I have a deep passion for it. I think it's a very interesting use of symbol, and it's also, it feels very never ending. It feels like there's a very deep well that you can draw from there. But, you know, not all astrology is psychological. You know, not everything is about, you know, psychology of individuals. Some things are kind of about the, you know, broader experience of psychology of multiple individuals, or, you know, so there's a lot of different places that astrology can go. I started studying horary astrology and traditional technique in 2013. With Deb Holding, and then started, I went into a mentorship program with her for a year and a half, 2 years, and then I came on to teach at the back half of 2015 for the same school that I studied under in 2013. So now I think probably people associate me with horary astrology, but my natal practice is busier than my horary practice. So like I have, you know, a good mixture of natal, electional, and horary clients, and then I also do tutoring and teaching and writing. And, you know, I've got that thing that all astrologers have, where they've got about 20 different jobs, you know. Bring it all together under the umbrella of astrology.
I know, right? I'm like, okay, look, I'm like an astrologer, but like also a chef.
I know, someone's like, what do you do for work? It's like, well, let me tell you. It's like,
I'm like, some stuff.
Yeah, got a little bit of everything going on. So
Right. That's awesome. And so if people want to find you, connect with you, stalk you on the internet, where do they
Oh
find
God. Yeah, probably the best thing to do is to go to my website or maybe my Twitter feed, I suppose. It's just wadecaves.com, or at wadecaves is my Twitter handle. I also have Instagram, but I'm not terribly active on social media in general. But the thing is, my website is currently under development. I'm rejigging it right now. So it is down temporarily, but it's going to be back up within Scorpio season. So I've only got like, 2 more weeks, and I've got to kind of churn out the rest of all these changes that need to get done. So wadecaves.com, but you might not be able to access it for a couple more weeks.
Well, now you know, and I'll make sure you guys that Wade's information is in the description box down below, of course, so that you can go check out. And I really feel like I want to send you more horror people. He gave me a small demonstration of like horror this morning, and I was like, that's like my whole face, because it was so cool. And he was like, and then this and this. So I obviously knew this. And I'm like, wait, obviously.
No, well, hold on. I don't think I said obviously. I probably did swing my neck a few times, but
perhaps it was just the neck swing I took as the obvious. Of course, is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into this. Let's talk about where we're going energetically first. We've got the eclipse coming up here on November 19th, and it's going to be at 27 degrees of Taurus. So again, you guys, if you don't have your charts, either go to astro.com, get one, come get one from me, from Wade, wherever, because it really gets a little bit more juicy when you can see what's activated for you personally. And if you happen to be a mundane studier, of course, look at what's going on in your country, city, or anything else to see where that 27 degrees is landing. But this is, we begin to change the axes. We're going to leave Gemini Sag, which we've traveled with, and move into Taurus Scorpio. So revelation, even as we were talking at the beginning, I think there's more that is under this revelation, but I kind of have a sense, and I'm interested from you, if some of this revelation isn't where structurally, societally, we've had these false beliefs or limitations or truths, of course, that haven't been there, but also with Uranus and Taurus, where we personally had to be put in position to find the value of our own freedoms without waiting for a society or others to tell us that we're valuable enough to go take that seat, So
yeah, I do know what you mean. I think those are they're very provocative symbols to work with. I mean, on the date of the the eclipse, Mars is also opposing Uranus at 13 degrees of Scorpio. So the eclipse, there's a lot of tensions in the eclipse chart. If you haven't seen it, there's a lot of squares. Of course, in this, because it's a lunar eclipse, it's already an opposition between the sun and moon. So that's part of it. But that square, would you be all right if I just showed the chart with the groups?
Yes, please do. Go ahead. Yeah, let's
I imagine it makes it easier. For the sake of making life easy on folks, I should say that this is the lunar eclipse chart, but it's placed in DC. So, this is just timed and dated for the US. You can place it wherever you like. But anyway, this is what I'll use. And yes,
I have to get my life together with this little arrow. God.
Hold up. If you thought that was cute, just hold up. So I think there is this opposition that's happening between, the moon and sun. It is an eclipse. It's a lunar eclipse. I think when we're talking about lunar eclipses anyway, we have to remember with lunar eclipses that the scope is not as broad as we get with a solar eclipse, but it's also a lot more ethereal with a lunar eclipse. It's not as clear of a cutting off of light as it is with a solar eclipse. It does seem to kind of move in the shadows. It doesn't have a harsh cutoff. It seems to be a lot more pervasive and kind of impact areas that you may or may not expect. I think what's fascinating to me is that this eclipse falls on a T-square with Jupiter. And you had said something earlier, Stormie, about our belief systems as it relates to the structures and how did you word that when you were talking about things kind of falling and not serving their purpose for us? Do you remember how you worded it? It was beautiful.
We'll find out when we watch back.
People will have to hit rewind. But I think the thing that kind of is jumping out for me whenever Jupiter has been involved in hard aspect it's a conversation about the belief systems that we're holding on to anyway, and the faith that we essentially have. Whenever you've got this kind of hard aspect with Jupiter, there are systems that come under question, but they're also, I mean, it kind of brings in another layer about, what is it that we believe and how do we think things should be structured, restructured. Now, an eclipse like this, I mean, we get multiple eclipses a year. I'm not 100% sure that this is going to bring every cathedral coming down, but it's an interesting eclipse anyway. It's one of those ones that clear a lot of emotional space. I'm also just kind of noticing with this that there may be quite a material impact on the back of this one, although I don't know what necessarily to expect. The reason that I say that is because this eclipse at 27 degrees of Taurus, it hits right on Mark Zuckerberg's sun. And, we've had Facebook in the news quite a bit over the last couple of months. Right. So like the thing is, it seems like Zuckerberg or the board of directors of Facebook or Facebook itself gets into some bad news, and then within 24 hours, suddenly all Facebook servers are down with no explanation. WhatsApp is gone, Instagram's gone, Facebook is gone, Messenger is gone. All these lines of communication that we have for establishing safety and that kind of connection, they just disappear when Facebook servers go down. Something about that to me that seems to suggest that it's about trying to remind us of how important Zuckerberg's industries have become to human operation, globally. When I was living in Europe, I mean, that's what we used because we had people in so many different countries and their different phone plans. And, it was like the one way we could connect, was WhatsApp. So I think that there's something about this, that eclipse falling at 27 degrees of Taurus, where right now, we have that kind of opposition. And Facebook itself is actually undergoing, if I remember correctly, Facebook is undergoing a nodal return right now. It's just about to go through that. So I don't know if I've got like a contested time for Facebook or how reliable it is. Let me just pull it up quickly because I think that there's something interesting to say, but I can turn it to you for a second while I pull up the Facebook chart, if that's all right.
Absolutely. No. I think that's great because those are interesting evaluations, and you really follow like Facebook and that kind of stuff. And it's neat that that's the niche that you kind of gravitate towards, because like you said, those things play a big impact in our day-to-day living anymore. So whether you're using social media, you like it, you don't like it, ignoring its presence in our day-to-day functioning anymore, I think we're past that place. Like,
it's just not realistic. I think that's what it comes down to, is it's just not realistic. I think what's kind of fascinating to me, and there's a couple things that you and I should talk about and just kind of keep in mind, because we'll be maybe pulling things back and forth as we go. First of all, you and I are talking right now while the moon is transiting Facebook's moon. So I think there's already something about, exactly. And they were born on a Sun-Neptune conjunction. We've got a conversation that's coming up about Jupiter-Neptune. And, if we think about where Jupiter and Neptune conjoin, where is that? It's like bam on Facebook's descendant, that happens right there on their descendant. But you can see that there's this nodal return that they're going through as well. We've got the eclipse that's going to fall in the 9th and 3rd houses. So I think that this is pointing to legal issues, communication issues, server issues, downtime issues. Those are the kind of things that I might expect to come out of an eclipse like that. But that's just, Facebook's potential manifestation for it. I mean, this eclipse, when we think about it from an experiential point, for most of us, is just humans. We have to kind of look and see where in our birth chart we find this eclipse falling. Do you work much with clients on isolating where the eclipse is likely to show up?
Absolutely, yes, because I just feel like I want people to work smarter, not harder. I'm like, you will be here all day wondering what Ceres is doing. Like, let's just get what, and because I really think as humans we can get exhausted and discouraged, trying to work on too many things. And it's like, let's slow down and focus in right here. So I'm big.
Oh my God, I feel so the same. So actually, you've just said something. So like last night, I just realized the kind of astrologer that I am. It was like, I feel like I'm at that stage in my profession, Stormie, where I'm finally figuring out my own style of practice, my unique voice. Like I'm getting very clear on what these things are. And I realized that I'm an astrologer of motion. That is what I like to study, is the astrology of motion. So, to tell you what that means practically, it's this idea that instead, like for natal consultations with me, like for a long time, I really didn't enjoy them because it was like I'd have a birth chart in front of me and somebody's like, well, just tell me what you think about it. I'm like, I don't think anything, it's like I don't know what to say exactly. Like, what do you want me to think? What do you want to talk about? But lately I've started working with a consultation chart and taking a look at what's happening right here, right now as part of this conversation, because the natal chart is a snapshot of a dynamic life that's constantly in flux, and different parts of your birth chart will come to life at different periods, and wanting to find ways to work with that and isolate which perspectives from your birth chart should we be taking today. And then in a year, it could be something else. So, it could be your Jupiter-Pluto opposition that we're exploring today, and next week, it'll be next year, it'll be a Mercury-Mars conjunction, and what that has to say about your continual evolution as an individual. What I kind of realized is that the joy for me in astrology is being able to measure the quality of motion, and to understand when your life is in motion and you're making decisions and you're moving forward, how do we improve the quality of the decisions that you make, the information that reaches you, and the impact that you've got. But it's all going to be centered around motion. If you come and sit to me and say, well, nothing's really happening in my life, but I just wanted to get a natal chart, then it's a study about why your life is not in motion. Why are you coming to me in a place of stillness? But it's not stillness in the like nirvana sense. Is this stagnation? What is this? Yeah, so I completely agree with you. I like the idea of kind of trying to bring the scope in, because when we try to keep it too wide and answer just about anything for anybody, we lose a lot of the potential value in a signature. This eclipse, I think when these eclipses fall in winter, I always think about the eclipses when they fall in the winter months as being the potential for there to be kind of an isolating experience on one side of it. Winter in the northern hemisphere it's sometimes a little bit hard, especially over the last few years, to get connected with people. The nights are longer, the sunset gets up later. Any kind of disruption of light, which is what an eclipse is, can cause a little bit of feeling of isolation, but that can be very productive isolation. So like you said, I think it's kind of one of these things of working with the signatures that we've got, understanding how it impacts, or maybe it doesn't, but how it impacts your own personal astrology. And then, doing what you can to redirect those energies into somewhere productive.
Yeah.
So yeah, with this eclipse in Taurus, we're talking about cleaning out the cobwebs in Taurian type spaces. So wherever you find Taurus in your own birth chart. I think also with the moon in Taurus, everyday relationships, because the moon governs everyday relationships and the networks that we have around us just by the fact that we are alive and we are in societies. So when there's an eclipse to the moon, especially when she's exalted, we do have an opportunity to reassess the immediate network that's around us, and to what extent we feel like, is this the right? Eclipses are very good at like turning the lights permanently off or something. So, if it's time to close some things down, that could be a constructive way to use this too.
Sure, which is a really neat thing. Well, two thoughts here. I love that you're an astrologer of motion, because I found out in this last year that I'm an astrologer of language. I'm like, why are we talking about that? What do we need to talk about? Which is so great, because essentially we're trying to do the same thing. We're like, we just want you to move your feet in the energetic path.
And you know what? For both of us, it's connected into Mercury. I remember that you've got a strong Mercury, and as do I. Mine's right on the IC. So when I think about motion, I've got a very tight connection between Mercury, Uranus, and Mars. So it's the motion element, but in your Mercury part, it's the ideation and the language and the communication and the eyes and the expression and the exchange. And yeah, I see it.
It's so that's beautiful. So the other thought, though, is even leading up to the revelation in November, we get this Scorpio moon.
Yeah.
Right? We get the new moon in Scorpio. And while I think it's that delicious opportunity, plant those seeds of intention, all of that good stuff to allow something to come forward and be prepared to strive, right, to what's next. I also think that new moon leaves us in a beautiful space of revelation. Like, here is what I haven't been able to say. Here's what I haven't been able to clearly identify. So by the time we walk into, look at it, the whole gang is here.
To be honest, this one is so, because it happens right in opposition to Uranus. That is such a tie. I think you're right to focus on this one. This one is really electric, isn't it?
It is. It's really electric. And also, I think that this particular opposition, because the way I treat opposition is I'm like, cool, both sides are right, integrate. Where can they meet in the middle? Right.
Mm.
So I think that that Uranian energy coming together with the revelation that Scorpio's got to the table here, Uranus is like, we need a different perspective.
Mm.
We need swap, like do that different, put the money this way, say the thing in the relationship. Everything can't be commitment forever, Taurus. You have to pry it out of your hands and let it be something else. And also, you can't cry and boss up at the same time. That's what this opposition.
I know that's right. I know that's right.
A lot about, because I think about in that Taurus energy so much, especially as we move into the Taurus Scorpio nodal axes. Like Taurus just wants commitment forever. And it's like, or show me my worth.
And I think part of the conversation also is shifting where we start to measure permanence. I think that there's a measurement of permanence that is about time and not about quality, or it's about time. I mean, I'm struck by this symbol of the fixed signs. It is their strength to be able to withstand. I mean, that is their effective strength. And, we don't want to take that away from them, but there's also, just as you said, a language here about how to shift our relationship to fixity. And I kind of think that on some level, the expectation that I would have with that is that we need to kind of step back a little bit and take a look at the broader piece of work that we are developing, whether it's in our own lives or, collectively as a community, whatever community that may or may not be. But as this kind of comes together, do we step back and say that the permanent structure that we're building is actually, all of this, and this thing that I'm really gripping onto because I'm afraid to let go is actually just an installment of a long, so you can let it go, because that's not where the permanence is. The permanence is a layer above that or a layer above that. And it can be a really good counseling tool for letting things go. But, in opposition to Uranus, it's not going to be, in my opinion, it doesn't look comfortable. It looks like it probably comes on the back of a bit of a shock and a little bit of discomfort and maybe a bit of dissociation, but that can all be put to productive use if we choose. So.
Sure. Well, I mean, Uranus is over there in Taurus, which means that Taurus is being shaken, not stirred. Okay. Because like mountains don't really like to be disrupted, first of all.
A of all, B of all.
Any of all. Right? But the great principle, I think, dealing with fixed earth here is that when it does get rumbled, we realize there were more gems than jewels and minerals in the depth that we maybe couldn't access before. And one of these questions, I really do think Wade is going to be like, I don't want to work that way. And I thought I needed permission. And I certainly, on a global sense, needed the world to catch up with what my insides have been telling me for years. And now people are like, convert your van into a house and go shoot your life. Also, we'll pay you for it. Right? Like we've been waiting for that to happen. We've been waiting for there to be space in our world living structure, economy, all of it, for that I don't want to go at this pace anymore. So like revaluing time and all of these things. So I don't think that it's necessarily comfortable, like you said. I think it is shocking. I think it is going to be surprising, but I do think it's going to be really, really useful.
Well, and also we have to kind of remember, at least in the US, we can't really state this kind of elsewhere, but what's really nice about what's being shown here is that there's a very strong 9th house theme and 7th house theme that is translating itself into this kind of thought and ideation related to permanence. So I just kind of want to trail this for you quickly, and then we can move on if we like.
Yes.
But what I've been really struck by over the last couple of weeks in consulting is that, if we take a look at what's going on like right here, right now, I don't know if this is actually right here, right now. It's close enough. You can this was earlier today, probably when I opened my software this morning. Yeah. So at the start of my consulting day, you can see that there's been this Mercury-Jupiter trine that's been building. Now, for a long time, Stormie, Jupiter and Mercury were not in orb of each other. They were quite far away. Sure. And so anyone who was looking for a property transaction or a deal or a negotiation or something, they weren't coming together on their own. But what was happening was Venus was separating by sextile from Mercury, because when Mercury stationed direct, Venus swept over by sextile. So she was moving past and hit sextile. And so she separated, contacted no other planets, and then is just now beginning to push all of that Mercury signification onto Jupiter. So this is very...
We needed to get it together for a minute. She's like, what
right.
did you say?
And she's uniting it. So it's always been at the middle of this, over the last couple of weeks of consulting, that Venus has always represented there needed to be more capital, a little bit of a freedom of the feminine principle, a little bit more freedom to roam, freedom to move. Also, where the Venus is concerned, we're talking about relationships and our communication style and the way people come together. So it was always relevant. If we take a look at what's kind of happening now, I mean, Mercury and Jupiter have passed over each other when we move into this new moon. Mercury and Jupiter have passed over each other, but Venus and Jupiter are now being they're kind of in contact with each other, because Mercury is now translating from one to the other. I mean, now the translations actually flip the script between them. So what this shows me is, like, while we have this fixed sign opposition and a benefic and a fixed sign, we also show the relay of cardinal and mutable energies being really focused in the 9th house and 7th house. And this is where we start to shake up a little bit. So if you need to get some cement up off the ground, for instance, it's the cardinal and mutable energy that's the jackhammer that's going to help you. So when we take a look at this with Mercury and Venus, I mean, it is crafts, music, enjoyment, but also when we're talking about 9th house themes, we're talking about everything related to, mysticism and our connection with the divine, but also legal help. So I kind of think a little bit of this, like if you got to sue your employer to get your, rights together, think about it, because this is, the configurations happening here with Venus is a little bit a nicely worded letter, with legal letterhead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
yeah.
even just looking here, just looking at this beautiful 7th house configuration, right? Like now we see the node is pushed off into Sagittarius, and obviously Mercury's here in Libra, but squishing in the Scorpio energy, I feel like these guys show up as friends. They're like, look, we already tried that. We got to get some things in balance. So it's like, the whole crew is here. There's basically been an intervention.
Well, and also the other thing to keep into consideration is that Mars hasn't really been celestially born yet. So the things that get seeded here, because Mars is still not visible. Mars and the Sun recently had a conjunction in Libra, actually right on the descendant of this chart, but we did not have visibility. So I think as the Sun begins to pull away and we start to see Mars in its heliacal rising when it becomes a morning star in a few days' time, a couple weeks' time, I think what we'll be looking at is we will actually get to see, because this whole lunation is happening in Scorpio. So when Mars becomes visible, I think we start to get to see the effects of this a little bit. So this is like a seed planted, and then a couple weeks later, maybe about 10 days later, we start to see, something a bit bigger and broader. Actually, it'll be more than that because Mars is moving very quickly. Sorry.
A little something. Yeah, but I know that Mars is happy to be home. He's like, oh, I was over here trying to be
I know. It's very good to have Mars back in Scorpio, I have to say.
Okay, so as we kick off, though, from here, we have the eclipse energies kind of bring us to a different set of energy. They bring our attention. For me, I feel like the lunar eclipse in Taurus is going to be a big releasing that probably, from my estimation, really comes from some things that we see or are revealed from that Scorpio new moon. And then, though, we travel in this axis throughout 2022. So what do you think? What do you think with that? There's a lot, like you said, even with these legal things, it's like, if you're going to start that business and do an LLC or do whatever you're going to do or move into what's next, that is a legal transaction.
Do you know what? We've had an interesting kind of relationship to eclipses lately. I mean, like when they were happening in cardinal signs, it did kind of feel like the fallout. I'll tell you what the traditional principle is, because that's going to be faster. I mean, with a cardinal emphasis, things come together or they fall apart quickly, because cardinal signs are about rapid change and development. They don't withstand pressure. They just bring and usher in change, and irrespective of what that change is or looks like, that's just kind of, it's, what? Did I say something bad?
No, I'm just already laughing because I'm like, fixed energy is like, I'm getting to it.
See, but then it went from cardinal to mutable, though, is what that's the direction that it went in. So we went somewhere in between those, where we moved into this liminal space of like, if something, because eclipses, they point out particular vulnerabilities and things, and then they have this kind of emanating impact that is not all centered on vulnerability, but the origin of why we experience it is centered on the loss of light of a principle in the sky. So then when we move into the mutable signs, it's almost like, well, we lose a little bit of what we kind of expected, but not all of it, because the mutable signs, they do things by half measure, and that's their value. That is their value. We do not want them. It is sometimes so useful to work with mutable signs when we don't want things to be too fast or too slow. We don't want them to be too extreme or too, underwhelming. We want something nice and,
we need to try it out a little.
They're the Goldilocks signs a little bit. So, there's something about the eclipses that have been falling in those signs. Of course, if they've hit a personal point to you, it's not going to feel in any way neutral as far as you're concerned. But on a global system, like what has really fallen over the last, since the eclipses were moving in through these signs. I mean, we had some really weird things when the nodes were still in the cardinal signs. And then at the beginning of the cycle, but it wasn't really the eclipses, it was other things that were kicking off. But the eclipses now are moving into fixed signs, and this is where the real structures that thought that they were not touchable, because they were maybe too deep, or maybe they just don't respond to the laws of motion in the same way. What does it mean? What does it mean to a jug of water if you shake it? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. But Earth doesn't have that same relationship, So there is something I think that we can expect from these eclipses. I'm using this kind of volcanic earthquake language because of the Uranus-Mars opposition that is attending this eclipse. It's happening in the same signs. It's still relevant as part of the equation. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it is, I believe that the universe is kind and on time, and it takes a mutable energy to convince fixed energy to give anything up. It's like, what? Turns out I've done some research, and
that's true. It's almost,
if you give it to
me. It's almost what the ancient literature would say is that the beginning of a sign is when it's strongest, and at the end is when it's weakest. And this is why it gives way to the next part of the phase, because it no longer, so the cardinal signs, they lose their capacity for change by the time they come to the fixed sign. The fixed sign loses its capacity to constrain and to hold tight, and then it yields, and then we have this murky period before change comes back into.
It's like so ancient and beautiful. I'm like, cardinal signs go as far as they can, and they're like, I'm not interested. And so Taurus is like, I don't want the planet to fall apart.
And so we're just gotta hold, it's got that exactly. Yeah.
Yes, and then a mutable energy is like, okay, look, you won't die. Can I hold it for a minute?
Just let it go. Just let it go.
And then they, get all stressed out and worry, and the anxiety so high. And then we have another cardinal sign come in and be like, I'll save you. Watch.
Right.
It's like a whole.
It can definitely feel that way. I can definitely feel that way. I mean, I do imagine that eclipses coming out of the fixed signs and into cardinal signs, because you have to remember that most of human motion goes cardinal, fixed, mutable. The eclipses happen in a reverse order, which is why they feel, I think, is part of why they feel so jarring, because they don't follow the same order. We go from mutable to fixed to cardinal, as opposed to the other way around, which we are very accustomed to in the way that we manage seasons and projects and anything, really. So there's something about the eclipse cycle which puts us, it's like a permanent exploration of retrogradation. It's a very shocking kind of feel, but it's sorry, go ahead.
That conversation between what is my insides, what are my insides saying, that may be in conflict with what my outside world is presenting, and I misunderstand opposition, my integration here. And I think that's a real personal and cultural sometimes exploration that has to happen, because I have to listen here first.
Yeah. Well, and I can also tell you that part of this, it's not going to shake up everything in your life. I can almost guarantee you that you're holding on to, not you, Stormie, but someone, somebody, I can just tell you that we all have unhealthy attachments. It's that simple. Eclipses, they give us an opportunity to let go of one. That's kind of what it does. So the thing is, it's inevitable that there's somewhere in your life that is not coherent. Actually, there's many places in life where we are not living a coherent life, where our values are in full effect from start to finish. That's where peace is where every part of our life is in agreement with itself. And some of us have better experiences with that than others. Those of us who were born with good contacts with benefics in our birth chart might feel like it's easier for us to either find ourselves in harmony with ourselves or ignore the parts that aren't, so we feel good about it anyway. But then those of us who are in square are in constant friction and tension with this kind of concept of what does it mean to know peace, what does this kind of feel like. So there is going to be a theme. If you are feeling the eclipse, I'm just, to anybody listening, I would certainly encourage getting booked in with somebody to talk about what's good, so that they can help shape you out a little bit with what to expect and how to use that time productively. I think that there's a lot in this that can be done productively. I mean, there's that Mercury Sun conjunction, both of those in sextile to Pluto, which I find to be it's like Pluto's at the midpoint kind of between Mercury and the Sun.
Yeah.
I find that a fascinating symbol, with Pluto being kind of it's moving on, and it's right on the IC, this eclipse in DC. So this is why I'm kind of giving it attention, because it's angular, but there's something to explore here.
Some things are done. And I think whether we're talking about the United States, Wade, or we're talking about ourselves personally, some pieces of us, however identifiable they are, have died off because they don't work. And a big thing that we can just look and see is the way that we work. It's different, but what do I do with that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think also we're watching the end now of a Pluto. I mean, we're about to move into Pluto and Aquarius. Things are just shifting, things are changing, and it's been a while since we've had Pluto make an ingress into a new sign. So there's a lot coming up.
So I think it is worth, and this is my practice, but I think it's worth, especially with that Pluto energy, acknowledging the ushy-gushies. Like, where are you different? Like, pause and look back to 2008. Where are you different? And be that person. Bring those transformative changes. And also a piece of that for me when I work with my clients is I'm like, absolutely acknowledging the current reality.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that this is a gift of this Pluto transit, is that it's straightforward at this eclipse, right? It is straightforward. It's like, baby, you are different.
And also there's no, for those who it's like, there's also no pressure to recognize it as a gift right now. It might be something that only becomes clear in hindsight. I don't know about you, but my hindsight's a lot better than my foresight.
My hindsight is better than my foresight, but that is why I sit with somebody so that they can see what I can, and I can begin even a small movement as that woman that they see. She's kicking ass. I'm gonna just say it. Like, I like it. I'm like, I yelled at my husband today, so we'll address that later. But I was like, but I yelled at my husband about something that I didn't have the power to step into before.
Yeah.
It also made me realize this whole core belief over here that I get to talk to my spiritual teacher about and be like, well, how long has that been there and driving my behavior?
Right.
It's a whole dynamic thing, but and it wasn't like peaceful and gentle. And I went into the night. I was like, hey, I think this sucks. So I was like, but what it spurred for, honestly, I think for both of us, because to get me to yell is like, you have to move a planet. So that's pretty amazing. But I was like, oh, there is something different here.
I feel you.
Okay, anywho, so we'll get to watch that essentially all throughout 2022 and see what those layers continue to peel down. And we'll go through that, you guys, every month. And I know Wade will be covering it as well. But we can start to see where the new value structures are going to come in and where the old ones are becoming unfixed, to adjust. And I think that that is probably uncomfortable because it seems like, one, if you have parents, you have parent issues. And if you are in the world, you have being with other people issues. right? And also, like, if you're changing, humans seem to do really good actually at change, I find, but we are rough in the transition. It's the hallway that gets us. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
we used to say that all the time. It's not change management, it's transition management. That's where the real struggle is. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know how many people who it's like, I'm totally down for anything. The only things I don't like are the way it is and change. And I'm like, so you don't like transition, is what I just heard you say.
Right, right.
Me too, you know? Okay. So I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about that kind of? I think there's a major shift financially for people too, just because Taurus is like that. But do you have anything else on?
Well, there is a bit of a shift, but I think that probably there's going to be broad conversations happening on that score with Jupiter's ingress into Pisces anyway. That ingress into Pisces is probably going to kick up a lot of questions about, about material wealth and yeah, things of that nature. So no, I don't have anything else to add at this stage, I suppose I would say.
Sure. And Jupiter's going to run his cute little self in there into Aries too for a little bit. And I'm going to be like,
yeah, well,
come through.
Right. It's so quick. I mean, this year, Jupiter moved through Pisces, or it moved through Aquarius very quickly, and then it retrograded back. Just for anybody who's watching, this will happen every single time Jupiter makes an ingress when the sun is within a sign away. It's like it will move extremely, actually up to a sextile away. So we've got Jupiter moving into Pisces right around the time the sun enters into Capricorn. And so when Jupiter enters into Pisces, it's only there for a couple months and it's into Aries by the time we get into summer, which is freaking wild when you really think about it. That is so fast.
It's so fast, and it camps out for
Yeah.
a really long time. Like, and then it's like, oh, okay, I got to go visit Pisces for like a couple months, get my things because I'm moving out. And then I'm moving back into Aries.
And there's something about, I think that kind of what ends up happening is people are expecting, Jupiter's ingress into Pisces to just open up all the floodgates and then all the coins fall from the sky and everyone's going to get rich and everyone's going to be happy. And I think what they're missing is that when a planet enters into its own sign and it becomes well configured, that's a time to plant seeds. It's not a time to harvest them. It might be if you've already planted them,
Sure, right?
But more like
in May. Were you planting?
Exactly. I mean, and it should have been something along the lines of, whatever it is that you are sowing in Pisces, there should be reasonable configurations back to the time where you started to actually, put those seeds into the ground and water them. So, to reap, you have to be able to establish some kind of connection astrologically anyway, to feel good about it. I didn't really invest a whole bunch before, so I'm not putting too much on, Jupiter moving into Pisces personally, but I think globally, I think there will be a collective sigh of relief, because at the very least, what Jupiter in Pisces does is it acts predictably, and so there's at least one more planet that is doing what we expect it to do. Now, the problem is we expect it to do always good things, and that. Right. That's the issue. Jupiter has an association with the nobility, upper classes, wealth, gentrification. If you look in the old text, it says the gentry is ruled by Jupiter. It's where we get gentrification from. It's just this idea that wealth pushes and spreads itself and out and takes over more. It's a Jupiterian concept. I mean, that is what, if you think about the effects of gentrification, that is Jupiter. With Jupiter moving into Pisces, gentrification efforts will be multiplied. They will fundamentally move faster. If you are in property development, housing development, you will see those industries get really crazy. It's going to be a very hot property market in the spring. So there's just kind of things we have to kind of think about from Jupiter's perspective. What does it mean to be strong? Not what do we want Jupiter to do for us? Right. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. I agree. And I love that. And I love the planting phase, because I was planting. I was over here with my little garden gloves planting. Because I think my experience too of Jupiter and Pisces and then coming together with Neptune is like this concept I've been talking a lot about on this channel, which is make ready the space of what you're asking for, even in a small dose, you know what I mean? And along with it, for me, and for some of you guys out there, I want to hear about it. What did you have to become more self-developed in? Because my experience of Jupiter is that he's down. But he's like, but you need the experience to have the wisdom to understand how I'm trying to work in your life. And that's accessing that piece of me that has the wisdom or has been taught. Like I've needed to bring in teachers, Jupiter, gurus, to say, oh, this is what this is. And that has been a piece of that spiritual and self-development as well. And for many people, you know, I mean, you can go to Instagram, TikTok, any of them, they're like, take a class and learn how to Bitcoin, real estate, digital products, you know, whatever it is, and make ready the space. And maybe we need a time in the middle to practice a little. So now as Jupiter and Neptune come together.
And I've just put that chart up for us to review just to show you. So this is the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in 12 April 2022.
And it's beautiful, right? Like I'm digging it. Now the thing, I'm starting out with the bad news, I think.
Yeah, why not?
Have to be, they are boundless. Jupiter and Neptune are like, whew. So if I think, or I have an expectation or a belief that is really unrealistic, as opposed to challenging where I thought I could grow from, this I think gets complicated, and I think is a space of some disappointment. Not to say that we're not going to be disappointed, because if you're trying at something, you're going to be disappointed because you're probably going to fail for a minute, right? But I think that intuitive motion, if we can be a little bit realistic, or we can be seeking information that helps us scale thought or the expectation, there's a lot that I think we can do with this particular conjunction. What about you?
Yeah, I think that Jupiter and Neptune together, let me start with the bad and then I'll open up with the good, just because I think that I'll tell you what I think. I get worried about the skill with which big money is able to reconfigure its mode of operations.
Sure.
We had a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. We were talking about this just before we connected in. We had a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in 2009.
Look at
and if you notice, so this is based in Washington, D.C., 3:50 a.m. on the 21st of December. And you can actually see there's a lot of things that are going on 2009. There's a lot of connections. So the first thing is that this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is happening right where Jupiter is right now. You know, it's actually, so this conversation is very much connected in with this Jupiter-Neptune theme anyway. So yeah, Stormie and I hopped on. I was like, what should we talk about? I was like, well, what about Jupiter? I think you said Jupiter-Neptune, and we pulled this up and I was like, wow, you know, this is the right time to think about it anyway. But, you know, this was, if you think about what was going on with the housing market back in 2007, 2008, 2009, the massive recession that we experienced globally, around the time that the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction happened, we were more or less on the outs with the recession, kind of in the same way that we are on the outs today. We are moving, I think most people would say that we're moving into a space where at least next year by April, by the time we hit this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, I think people will be able to feel reasonably confident that global economies are starting to track again. We're starting to move, and there's still nervousness and, you know, some degree of concern. But what I worry about with Jupiter's rulership over banking and big wealth and big money, Jupiter's connection with Neptune, is how difficult it will be to really trace what's going on and keep a pulse as to, you know, what is the nature of you know, the big money's move. Because, you know, we're coming out of this system recently with all these developments that have happened in 2020, 2021. We have different conversations now, different vernacular, different expectations. We've talked today about employers and relationships with employers, but also, you know, there were a lot of businesses took pretty big financial hits coming out of 2020 and 2021. And we're starting to see people load up on things like big businesses load up on things like Bitcoin, decentralized currency. And I mean, I guess the parallel that I'm trying to make is that coming out of 2009, with this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, one of the things that we saw insiders say was that the banking industry, for instance, didn't learn their lesson. They just learned how to cover their tracks better. They got smarter about it. You know, they didn't do anything different. They just said, well, we're going to do it this way. And you know, we effectively have, you know, the same kind of CDO situation, in different language today that we had back in 2008 when we had the housing crash, 2007, 2008. So coming back into the 2022 Jupiter-Neptune, part of what I worry about a little bit is where optimism causes us to stop looking and stop asking questions, because when the economy's up, a lot of us are up. It's like we're all feeling it. We're getting extra hours. We're not finding that it's difficult to find what we're look for commercially or materially. Things are, kind of relatively easy to access. And when things are easy to access, we stop asking questions. We don't have to rely on faith anymore, because faith is, it's something we hold on to when we don't have evidence of something. But sometimes Jupiter and Pisces brings evidence of good things. And so, I don't know. The concern I've got is that these things get connected where the boundaries become very messy, and then the relationship to our own belief systems, it sometimes it doesn't get the attention that it needs. So I with this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, I am actually excited about it, because I think that it's going to move us forward in terms of the conversation we've been having a long time about our collective humanity. I can remember that a lot of the Saturn-Neptune squares we had so many nasty responses to global humanitarian crises. I could remember, situation going on in Syria and Syrian refugee crisis, and there were a lot of signatures on like Saturn-Neptune square back when Saturn was in Sagittarius, of countries saying that we don't want to allow any refugees in. It was like, are you thinking, are you watching what's going on in the world? What are you, what is this? It was like we were in a battle for our own humanity. I think Jupiter Neptune gives us an opportunity to revisit that conversation, but I think it's going to be the Saturn Neptune conjunction where that goes into hyperdrive. So that's what I kind of see as coming up. But I also think anybody who works in the mystic world, anybody who works in the esoteric world, it's a good time for our community, you understand? Like, this is great for us, like, because we get to work with systems of belief and patterns. And there's just something really beautiful about a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces that opens up the door for hopefully a restoration of the mystic path is a very honorable part of the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that's interesting that you're saying that, because that's something that I was talking about with Maurice Fernandez as well. In particular, like how good it is like for us. And for me on this side, a piece of readying that space underneath all of this was because I think there will be a mass explosion of Piscean energy. And I have Pisces on the descendant. I see what I want. You know what I mean? It is really for me.
She said, I see what I want.
I have learned that, but
yeah.
So it's been really critical for me in this field specifically to get certified. Whereas before, like we're governless, do it or don't do it. But I was like, oh no, because it is real easy to go snatch that name and that title today and share what I think this chart is saying. And that is a piece of that place of, I think, of some disappointment, who are you letting speak into your life this year? Like, who the fuck are they? Like, is really the question. And I'm like, for me personally, I'm not saying anybody else, you don't get certified if you don't want to, but I was like, nah, I need my fellows to see how I practice. Yeah. So that we can maybe avoid some of that, because I know I have Pisces on the descendant. I've been dating people that aren't real for a really long time, so it's like kind of bridging the gap in that potential.
I've been going out to dates with holograms, Stormie.
These poor people. And you know what is so funny? The whole time I was like, I'm such a victim. And it turns out I was like the assassin the whole time, because they're like, I liked that.
I'm so sorry. You were the murderer the whole time?
I found out it was, did I set the ball rolling? Yes, I did. So, part of growing up, I have Saturn in Libra, so plenty to do.
I want to say also, just to continually tie this in, that Jupiter Neptune conjunction falls on Facebook's natal Venus, which rules their 9th house, and their and it falls in their 7th, which could open them up to potential litigation.
Sure.
I like planting these seeds if I can, because I just need one person with a good case to just say, I'm gonna use that astrology to take Facebook to task. So I'm just gonna keep planting seeds. If anybody listening wants a walkthrough of all of Facebook's weaknesses, let me know. I will tell you where the chinks in that armor are. This conjunction is a chink in that armor. So
yeah, well, and don't you think it's like it speaks to Jupiter Neptune here, really speaks to some of this idea on the social media advertising and things like that, where it's like, that's
oh,
not
that's
their real life. That's not their
yeah.
house they're recording in.
Actually, Stormy, that is a very good observation. So my mentor, Deb Holding, she once got invited to do like a, I think they were watchmakers or they did something, but they flew all these influencers out to this island and then to give them watches for like photo shoots and stuff, and like they wanted to really like pamper these influencers so that they would leave really great product reviews on their feeds. And they wanted to give these influencers an astrological consultation with a professional astrologer. So they contacted Deb and they flew her out to this island and she gave all these consultations to these influencers. And one of the things that she said she experienced over and over and over again, every single one of those people that she was consulting for, they all had a focal Jupiter. It was on the midheaven, or their luminaries were disposed by Jupiter. It was a very strong Jupiterian theme. Now, Jupiter has associations, ancient associations with fame and notoriety and being well known and having, really big kind of, they would say, for instance, that if in a theft chart, if the thief is signified by Jupiter, it's somebody well known. It may not be that you know this person, but they are a public figure, you would say. So there is something about this Jupiter-Neptune that is probably going to be talking about public figures. But because there's no really harsh aspect involved, I don't think we're popping any bubbles here. I think we're probably reimagining what the bubble looks like.
Yeah.
If I could say that. I mean, I don't really know what that what that means. It might be, birth of new platforms or new forms of social media, or maybe it means nothing and it's just a continuation. This is just a kiss on the brow of that industry and nothing gets touched. I don't know, but yeah, we'll have to keep a close eye. Exactly. We don't have to pretend to know just yet. We can just keep a close eye on it. Like it's like a mole that's changing size.
Yeah, I know, but this is me now, right? Like when I watch like Instagram or TikTok or something, I'm like, I would like to see, is this your real house? Do you have a deed for
right
that location?
Right.
That's because I'm like that. So
yeah, can I see the receipts?
Oh, receipts, that's a whole other thing. That's like we could do a whole other show on receipting.
Yeah, right.
Particular chart. Okay, so my gosh, I feel like we've just like explored.
Yeah,
which has been super cool. So final thoughts, Wade, the eclipse, Jupiter 2022. What do you got?
Yeah, well, there's nothing but paths being laid out, and I think that that's very useful. I mean, one thing to consider is that there's always going to be, this year it's Jupiter Neptune, last year it was, whatever it was, and the year before is whatever it was. There will always be something. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling like your life is stagnant and it's time for you to move on something that you've been wanting to move on, consider the ways that you might use these signatures coming up in the next few months to open up new doors for yourself. If you're struggling to figure out how you might place that, get in contact, with a professional astrologer, with your astrologer, or you can contact either of us, I'm sure. But I think the idea is just don't let the moment pass you by. It's very easy when you're just using, the interpretations of planets through signs to expect the floodgates to open, good things to fall. If you didn't build it, they can't come. So we have to put action into this. At the end of the day, the people who collect are the ones that have actually put the work in and put the action in. But it doesn't have to be physical action. This can be spiritual action, which could be stillness. You understand, because it's still a choice to engage in this. It is still an act to engage in intentional stillness. So I don't want the language to confuse anybody to think that, you have to be literally in motion, but there should be in some way, a utilization of these signatures. So, let an astrologer help you if you can sense in your heart that there's, something that needs to move. Now's the time.
You heard it here. And for all Facebook weaknesses, please see wadecaves.com.
wadecaves.com after, when it goes live. Otherwise, you can just email me. It's hello@wadecaves.com.
Oh my God, I love it. That is so good. All right. Wade, thank you so much for coming over, chatting. I would love to have you back. I feel like you're just so much fun. And your books are all organized by color.
Yeah. So you didn't get the full view, but now you can. So my thing is like, I might forget who wrote a book that I'm looking for or how I organized it, but I will never forget the color of the spine. So,
and what are your top three?
oh my gosh, since you've asked me, that's really great. I'm really loving here.
No, your sun sign. Your
I thought you meant big three books. I was like, wow.
You were on the roll. You were like, hold on.
I was ready. I was like, oh, I've got to do this quick. In my head, I was stressed. I was like, I know the first one I was going to pick. Okay, so I would say just quickly, The Moment of Astrology by Jeffrey Cornelius, Cosmic Loom by Dennis Elwell, and The Houses Temple of the Sky by Deborah Holding. Those are the three.
Wow.
Okay, so my big three, I'm an Aquarius with a Virgo moon and Scorpio rising.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's beautiful. All right, my beautiful friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. If you didn't have an opportunity to hit that like button, please do so we can share this content more with our friends and other astrology soulmates. Hopefully in this last amount of time we've been together, you heard something today that is worth the time you took to show up. And I most certainly think that we did. I'll make sure that Wade's information is in the description box down below. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time, where we're actually going to sit with Maurice Fernandez and talk about opportunities, especially for you budding astrologers or current practicing astrologers, to really get your practice together, learn some tools, get some skills in there at iAstrologer. So I will see you guys